All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for joining. We will get started shortly. If you could take some time to drop your name in the chat and where you're from and why you joined the conversation today, and we will start at the top of the hour. We have Andy Crocker, who's in Fort Worth, Texas today. Again, thank you all for joining. Feel free to drop your name in the chat box and tell us where you're from, and we'll get started shortly. All right, we have some more people joining. We'll get started shortly. Drop your name in the chat. Let us know where you're from. Thank you, Olga, for joining. Josephine, Tom. We have people all across the state today. Okay. And as people continue to join, we will go ahead and get started. So again, thank you for joining today's webinar. This is the second part to a three-part Aging in series titled Family Future Planning. If you were with us on the first session, thank you for returning. And then we have one more session following this one next week at 12 on next Wednesday, and we'll provide more information about that one. So today's the second part of the Aging in IDD Family Future Planning series titled Nuts and Bolts of Family Future Planning. And our speaker today will discuss legal and financial planning, residential plans, and a lot more really great information and resources. So my name is Morgan Bradley, and I am the Community Outreach Program Manager and Regional Coordinator with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service in partnership with the Texas Council for Developmental Disabilities. And I am joined today with many of my colleagues from across the state. And I'll go through an overview of our discussion today, provide a few Zoom tips, talk about our collaborative effort, ways you can connect with us, and a few announcements towards the end. We'll also have time for a Q&A session following our during today's session, all attendees' cameras and microphones are off. However, to communicate with our presenter or with any of the participants that are present, you can drop information in the chat box. And that is how you'll be able to communicate with us today. Closed captioning is now enabled. You can access closed captioning through our Zoom service. If you just click on allow the closed captioning, it will pop up on your screen. And I think that's all as far as technical stuff. If you have any more questions, just drop those in the chat and we'll help you out. All right, so the Texas Council for Developmental Disabilities, or TCDD, is a statewide governor-appointed board that is the only entity in state government solely focused on the needs and interests of individuals with developmental disabilities and their families. TCDD is mandated to provide input on state policy initiatives, build communities through statewide grant projects, and educate and inform the public and leaders on developmental disability issues. And for more information about TCDD, a link has been dropped in the chat. Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service is the outreach and community education arm of the Texas A&M system. For its more than 100-year history, Texas A&M AgriLife Extension has worked to help Texans better their lives through practical, applicable learning, through a statewide network of professional educators, trained volunteers, and a presence in all 254 counties, and the campuses of Texas A&M University and Prairie View A&M University. And more information about AgriLife Extension has been dropped in the chat as well. And then since 2019, TCDD has partnered with AgriLife Extension to create a regional connection of regional coordinators with a mission to help Texans with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And so there are regional coordinators housed throughout the state that are present here today. And you can connect with your regional coordinator through the link that was provided in the chat. Also included in the chat today will be today's handouts, and then I will pass it over to my colleague, Dr. Andy Crocker, Mr. Crocker, who will introduce our presenter today.
Thanks, Morgan. I'm pleased to welcome back Dr. Katie Arnold of the University of Illinois at Chicago and University Center of Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. Dr. Arnold is the Associate Project Director at the Institute on Disability and Human Development, UIC, the Illinois University Center of Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. She's passionate about supporting people with disabilities and their families to live full lives, and has helped to grow the sibling movement across the country in her role as Executive Director of the Sibling Leadership Network, a national nonprofit with state chapters that provides information and support to siblings of people with disabilities throughout their lifespan. Her sibling experience has shaped her worldview and influenced her career path. And so please give your attention to Dr. Arnold, and we thank her for joining us today, and I'm going to turn it over to her.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Morgan. Thanks so much for having me. Let me go ahead and share my screen as I get started today. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Just want to check. Yeah, okay, great. So today I'm going to share the nuts and bolts of future planning with you. This webinar is really going to provide a foundation of the basics to help you think about various areas to consider related to planning for the future. I'm going to help break it down into manageable steps and discuss various areas to think about when planning. And that'll include legal and financial planning, residential plans, communication supports, and building relationships and social support networks. As we go along today, feel free to jot down notes and ideas for things that are relevant to you and your family. And as I talk about future planning, I'll include some information from other families, as well as parts of my own story and how my family has planned. I'll be sharing resources throughout the presentation today. Here's a photo of me and my sibs. I'm the second oldest of 5, and we're all about 2 years apart. My sister Patrice has an intellectual disability. She and I are standing back to back in this photo, and she's in the blue dress. Patrice lives in New Jersey in a supported living arrangement that she moved into a number of years ago in the community that we grew up in. She's about 10 minutes from our parents and our 2 brothers and their families. Our youngest sister, Maggie, lives out of state with her family. So Maggie and I are both out of state sibs. My sibling experience has shaped my worldview and influenced my career path. I learned how to be an advocate at a young age when people would stare or use names such as the R word. I had to answer questions from my classmates and figure out how to adapt environments so that my sister was included. All of these skills have helped me well in my life. I live in the Chicago area with my husband, who's also a disability advocate, and our son with developmental disabilities. I've been working at the Institute on Disability and Human Development, Illinois' UCED, or University Center of Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, since 2002. And I helped create the National Sibling Leadership Network and became the first part-time executive director in 2012. The Sibling Leadership Network, or SLN, is a national nonprofit with state chapters dedicated to providing siblings of individuals with disabilities the information, support, and tools to advocate with their brothers and sisters and to promote the issues important to them and their entire families. We have sibling chapters in many states, and Texas began a chapter a number of years ago with the support of the Texas Center for Disability Studies at UT Austin through an investment of the Texas DD Council. You can find more information on the website. The chapters are the grassroots of the SLN and where the more personal contact happens, and each chapter has its own feel and flavor. I want to share some research as background related to the experience of people with IDD and their families with future planning. For my dissertation research, I interviewed 10 adults with IDD and a key support person that they chose to learn from their perspective about family support. All the names have been changed and identifying information has been removed to keep confidentiality. The topic of planning for the future is an informational support that families participated in as a way to support the person with IDD in the future. Future planning is the process of gathering information, discussing among the family, and making decisions about the future direction for the person with IDD in areas like where to live and work and who will be the primary support person or caregiver in the future. The process was difficult to start for many families because they needed to think about getting older and possibly dying, and who would be their support person, for the person with IDD in the future. So in this research, not all families had talked about the future. In some families, the parents had talked about things, but they had not discussed with the person with IDD. Ethan's dad explained, "We don't want to think about it, but we have made preparations." However, they had not shared their plans with Ethan. Half of the families had discussed future planning at least a little bit. Sam conveyed that future planning was something my mom and dad have always been talking to me about. Sam's mom said she had conversations with her son and stated, but the big goal is that he really starts to work on those independent living skills. Tina's dad revealed, "Yeah, we've been talking about it. However, he was a bit daunted by the whole thing, exclaiming, it's like when you have a daughter with this kind of disability, you have to figure out, someday somebody has to do this every day, basically forever." Ethan's dad said, "It's to take over the responsibility of a person's life. That is not a decision we make lightly." These families understood that future planning would help the person with IDD and their whole family in the long run, and they had started the planning process. Families find the prospect of future planning overwhelming, and while they understand the importance of it, families need more support to start the difficult dialogue and use a process that helps them think through all the aspects of planning for the future. A few families had already experienced major life transitions. Peter's sister talked about what it was like after their mom died and her brother and dad moved in with her family, including her husband and the children. She described the situation. And that's been a good positive shift through the years of my dad and my brother living with us, because there was a period where that was a transition too. Like, where does everybody fit into the picture? I think my dad at some points still has trouble with it. He's 83 and he's living in his daughter's house. The transition of Peter and his dad and to his sister's home after their mom died was not easy. Nick's mom shared that after he transitioned out of school, they had to identify his future options. She took him on what she talked about as, quote, a day program tour, sort of like a college tour. And every day we went to look at different day programs, and I wanted him to see different options. This helped Nick and his mom see what the various options were like and helped them make a decision about the best day program for him. Facing the reality of mortality, the idea that the primary caregiver would die in the future was a really difficult concept for families, though an important part of the future planning process. Nelson's mom remarked, I tell him we have to get ready for a world without me because I'm not always going to be here, and he doesn't want to hear it. Sam's mom stated, I talked to him a lot about it, about him learning to cook and him learning to take care of himself and him planning because, it's time to think that I just might not always be here. These families have begun to have the difficult dialogue about when parents may die. Joey's sister had been through the transition when their mom died. Now she was starting to think about what will happen if she is no longer around. She's thinking of passing on caregiving responsibilities to her own daughter if Joey lives longer than she does. Another part of the process was getting things in order in terms of legal and financial plans. A number of families had taken steps to set up legal and financial plans. For example, Peter's sister was set up to be his power of attorney. Judah's family had a will and special needs trust set up. Nelson's mom had a will drawn up to make sure any money went to the trust for him so it did not negatively impact his social services. The planning process could be stressful for families. Nick's mom talked about how there was a trust set up for him, but she stated, it's a little bit of a source of stress for me because if he dies and it's left, it all goes to the government. They take it. She had to identify who he would want to take care of him if she died. And they went through a list of people and put them in order into the will. This process has been stressful for Nick's mom to consider the future, though she's done it intentionally so things would be set up for him if something happened to her. Using a professional lawyer was helpful to some families for legal planning. Ethan's parents had set up a trust and done their wills. They selected the 3 close cousins that were like brothers to Ethan to be the trustee when they died. Ethan's dad explained, "Yes, we've talked with them and we asked them and they said, sure, I'll do that. And then we had to go to the lawyer's office to sign, and they went with us and we signed." Having a professional help them make things official was helpful for this family in planning for the future. Families discussed potential future living situations for the person with IDD. Brian's dad shared that we did talk years ago about living in a group home or different kind of shelters like that, and he still does not want anything to do with that. There were various options that families had discussed related to living situations for the person with IDD in the future. Peter's sister shared that her thinking changed after her brother had to go to a nursing home for a while when recovering from a medical issue. She stated, "I'll be honest with you, I've never pictured him elsewhere outside of us. And then when he went to the nursing home, at a certain point, the words that my mom would say rang back to me about how her brother needed more socialization. Like, I think there were points he really enjoyed it. So that nursing home experience was the first time I thought to myself, I'm like, maybe he might actually enjoy being in a group setting. Like, it's like actually occurred to me that maybe it's not such a bad thought. I'll be honest with you, the other side of it scares the heck out of me. There's some really horrible situations. So at this point, I don't know. I'm not even able to comprehend what we're going to do as time progresses." These examples that families needed information show that families needed information and experiences with various living options to help them make the best choice for the person with IDD in the future. Siblings often become the next generation of supporters and caregivers as parents age and pass away. Parents often do not want to impact the lives of their children with future caregiving roles, yet they often have an expectation that siblings will take on a role when the time comes. One parent shared her concern with having her other children take on future care for her son. Nelson's mom shared, "I also don't want either of my children to not live their lives. I don't want either of them, my older kids, to feel like it's expected of them, that if that was decided to not be the way they'd go, it will be fine. I know that they would always be a big part of his life and would be very supportive no matter where he is or what he's doing." This concern about their other children having their lives impacted by future potential care for their brother or sister with disabilities was common among parents of people with IDD. One family changed their future plans after they listened to what the person with IDD wanted. Brian's parents set up their will a while ago and put his oldest brother as the person who would take care of him. Since that time, they've had family conversations and learned what Brian really wanted for the future, and they listened to him. Brian's dad explained, "Our daughter was too young at the time, but as we've talked to him, he's definitely chosen he would want to live with them, his sister, versus his brother and sister-in-law." So that's been discussed, and it's discussed with the family. So Brian confirmed this and shared that his family had talked about what would happen when his parents were no longer around, and he stated, "I'd rather live with my sister because she's a lot closer." This family had discussed with each other and listened to what the person with IDD wanted and changed their future plan accordingly. Families were at different places in terms of how much they had discussed future planning with siblings. Some families had openly talked about the siblings' role in the future to become a caregiver for the person with IDD. When Nick's sister was old enough, she would become executor of his mom's estate and would decide where Nick would live. Erin's family had talked a lot about planning for the future. Erin and her parents moved across the country to be closer to Erin's sister after her parents retired. It was part of their plan for the future because they wanted to begin to transition support to Erin's sister sooner while her parents were still around. Her mom explained to Erin, "Aria is your closest living relative, and she wants to just stay in your life. And so we need to be here, and we know you want to stay here, want her to stay in your life." They talked about how when they are no longer here, Aria would be the primary person to care for Erin. These two families had an open dialogue that included the siblings in the future plans. In contrast, one family made plans without sharing with all the siblings or the person with IDD. Judah's mom said they set things up when Judah's sister was only 14 and they talked with her about things at the time. Now that she's almost the age where she would be as guardian if anything happened to them, they had another talk with her. However, they had not talked to Judah or the other brother about things yet. These examples show how families were at different points in the dialogue about future planning with the siblings and the person with IDD. This research also shows how critical it is for families to start to plan and confirms current research on the need for future planning early and often. My own family began to plan for the future a number of years ago. It started out from a place of fear because we were worried about the unknown of the future. During the initial meeting, our parents informed us that they had prepared everything for the future when they are no longer here, so we did not need to worry about anything. My parents really believed that. They had set everything up, but we realized there was a lot more for us to talk about and to consider. For example, our parents explained that they had set up a special needs trust for Patrice to be able to put aside some of her money in a place that's protected and will not negatively impact her health benefits. This was reassuring to find out because the financial aspect of future care can seem overwhelming. However, we realized that we needed to talk about the role of the trustee and who would be the best person for this responsibility. We also needed to get the word out to inform other people, like my grandmother, to not will money to Patrice directly, and instead to make sure it would go to her specific special needs trust so it would not jeopardize her Medicaid funding. Setting up a special needs trust does take an initial financial investment, although in the long run, it can also help save money. To set up a special needs trust, you need an attorney to help you through the process. You don't want just any lawyer to do this, or it can be set up incorrectly and do real financial damage to the whole family. The Special Needs Alliance is a national nonprofit with attorneys dedicated to the practice of disability and public benefits law. This is a great resource where you can find a lot of information, including attorneys who focus their practice in the disability law arena. You can search by your state, since some of the laws that need to be kept up with are state specific. For more information, visit specialneedsalliance.org. If your family's already chosen an attorney, you can search to see if that lawyer is part of the Special Needs Alliance. If not, you could ask the attorney how he or she keeps up with the special needs laws in the state to ensure the trust keeps relevant with current laws. You could even consider getting a second opinion on the trust that's been set up. My friend's parents got a trust set up by a lawyer that was not well versed in this area of law, and it was not done correctly and caused all sorts of trouble for the siblings when the parents passed away. So for peace of mind and to avoid problems in the future, it's important that it's done correctly. Then you need to make sure that any money that will be distributed, even through a will or life insurance policy when someone dies, is going to the specific special needs trust and not to the person with a disability directly. There's a special needs handbook available on the Special Needs Alliance website that has more information. Another thing to consider related to financial planning is setting up an ABLE account. ABLE stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience. The ABLE Act is a federal law passed in 2014 to help people with disabilities create a savings account for money that is to supplement, not to supplant, other benefits a person has. It's an important way for people with disabilities to save more money without it negatively impacting their benefits. The Texas ABLE program was established to encourage and assist individuals with disabilities and their families in saving funds to pay for many disability-related expenses critical to maintaining the individual's health, independence, and quality of life. The Texas ABLE program is established and maintained by the Texas Prepaid Higher Ed Tuition Board with assistance from the Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts. The Texas ABLE program is a great resource to help you learn more about the ABLE accounts in Texas. The financial planning aspect of future planning can include setting up a special needs trust and establishing an ABLE account as discussed above. Additional areas of financial planning could include getting the whole family on the same page in terms of what financial resources are available for the future. Part of this is understanding which potential benefits the person with disabilities has or is eligible for, including SSI, SSDI, Medicaid, and Medicare. I'll provide a brief overview, and I encourage you to take a look at the website called Your Texas Benefits, which provides a lot more detail. The Social Security and Supplemental Security Income disability programs are the largest of several federal programs that provide assistance to people with disabilities. While these two programs are different in many ways, both are administered by the Social Security Administration, and only individuals who have a disability and meet the medical criteria may qualify for benefits under either program. Social Security disability insurance pays a monthly benefit that can go to the person with disabilities when a parent has paid Social Security taxes. The SSDI program pays benefits to adults who have a disability that began before they became 22 years old. The benefits are paid to the person with disabilities based on their parent's Social Security earning records. So if the parent paid into Social Security and the person with disabilities was born with or acquired his or her disability before the age of 22 years old, they may be eligible to receive SSDI. SSI stands for Supplemental Security Income and pays benefits to disabled adults and children who have limited income and resources. This is based on financial need. Medicaid provides health coverage to eligible low-income adults, children, pregnant women, and people who are older or who have a disability. Each state has its own rules about who is eligible and what Medicaid covers. Some people qualify for both Medicare and Medicaid. Medicaid is the program that many people with disabilities use to get access to social and community supports, including housing supports and other long-term services. To find out if you might be eligible for Medicaid in Texas, visit Your Texas Benefits website. Medicare is the country's health insurance program for people age 65 and older. People younger than age 65 with certain disabilities or permanent kidney failure can also qualify for Medicare. The program helps with the cost of health care, but it does not cover all medical expenses or the cost of most long-term care. At my family's first future planning meeting, we also learned that our parents had put in their will that my older brother Keith and I would become co-guardians of Patrice upon their passing. However, they'd forgotten to ask me and Keith or Patrice. Our parents assumed that as the two oldest, we would automatically take on their parental role. Our initial response was, of course. As a family, we're still talking through this to figure out what's best for Patrice and our whole family. We've been learning about all of the alternatives to guardianship, as well as supported decision-making for Patrice. My parents made the decision about guardianship when Patrice was younger, and they didn't have information about all the alternatives. They did it out of a sense of love and protection. We've been discussing how guardianship takes away some of Patrice's rights, as well as the fact that Patrice continues to learn and grow in her ability to make decisions. We're trying to figure out how to support her in the best way we can so she can live the life that she wants. This is an area we're still talking about as a family. We're also learning about what it means to be a guardian and what being co-guardian would look like, since we've heard siblings that have had a difficult time with co-guardianship situations, since it means that two siblings have to sign off on anything official, and that can be challenging logistically. Supported decision-making is a process of supporting an adult with disabilities to make his or her own decisions that fosters the person's self-determination and does not take away their rights. In 2015, Texas became the first state to put supported decision-making into law. Texas recognizes supported decision-making agreements as important alternatives to guardianship. With the supported decision-making agreement, the person with disabilities chooses someone they trust to serve as their supporter and to help them make decisions in certain areas. Making decisions is a process, and some decisions are quick and easy while others are difficult and take time to think through. When making major decisions, many people turn to people they trust for advice and guidance. We all use supported decision-making in our lives, and it's part of living an interdependent life. Yet sometimes when people with disabilities ask for help, other people make the assumption that they're not capable of making a decision. Also, a person's capacity to make decisions may change over time. Time, experience, exposure, and opportunity to practice are all part of learning to make decisions. Families are important in providing support for decisions. Decision-making is a skill that we all learn over time and get practice with throughout our lives. For example, choosing what to wear, to eat, what to do during the day are important decisions that most people learn. For some people with disabilities, they're not given the opportunity to practice making decisions about their life, and they're therefore not always prepared when they become an adult. Families play an important role in helping to teach decision-making skills and preparing their loved one to lead a self-determined life. This means providing support in terms of giving information in an accessible way that the person can understand so they can make a decision. It also means allowing the person to make a decision that you may not agree with and respecting that decision. It might mean letting your family member make a poor decision that you know will have a negative consequence. Then it's about being there to provide support through the negative consequence as the person learns. After all, we all often learn the most from our failures, and it helps us grow as a person. There are a lot of great resources on supported decision-making from organizations in Texas, including information on supported decision-making and alternatives to guardianship that have been developed by the Texas Council for Developmental Disabilities. The Texas Sibling Network has a useful video about supported decision-making agreements that you can check out. A fact sheet on alternatives to guardianship and supported decision-making agreements from the ARC of Texas, and sample supported decision-making agreements from Disability Rights Texas. Also, the National Resource Center for Supported Decision-Making has resources including stories of supported decision-making that you can find on their website. In contrast to supported decision-making, surrogate or substitute decision-making is when a person is designated to make a decision on behalf of another person. Keep in mind that all decisions should always be made with the person. Here's an overview of various options for surrogate decision-making. Representative payee is when an individual organization serves as a representative to help a person manage his or her government benefits. This person's responsibility is to help determine how to distribute Social Security or supplemental security income funds for the individual. This person's in charge of keeping track of the money spent on the person's behalf and submitting the required forms and statements to the Social Security Administration on a yearly basis. No money can be used for the representative payee's personal expenses, and this person cannot charge for his or her services. To become a representative payee, a person must go in person to a local Social Security office and submit an application. Power of attorney is when someone is given authority to make legal and financial decisions on a person's behalf. The authority of the power of attorney can be over general legal and financial matters or be specific, such as having only the authority related to specific bank accounts. Power of attorney is different from guardianship because it does not declare a person incompetent or incapacitated, like when someone has a guardian. Additionally, the person can revoke or change power of attorney at any time. The roles and duties of the power of attorney are specified in the document, such as the types of decisions that the power of attorney can make on the person's behalf. For example, power of attorney can be specific to decisions about property or healthcare or other areas. However, power of attorney does not authorize to manage a person's government benefits. So a representative payee relationship would need to be established for that. Healthcare surrogacy or proxy is a document that allows an individual to appoint someone to make healthcare decisions for them if they are or become unable to make these types of decisions by themselves. The appointed person is supposed to make the decisions that they believe the individual would have made if they were able to make their own decision. Healthcare proxy can be for overall healthcare decisions or can be specified by the types of healthcare decisions the person is allowed to make. Guardianship is when someone is designated to make decisions on behalf of someone else. A person is declared incompetent and deemed to lack capacity to make decisions in order for a guardian to be appointed, and this happens through a court process. this should be the last option to consider because it can take away the rights of people. The National Guardianship Association stated that because establishing a guardianship may remove considerable rights from an individual, it should only be considered after alternatives to guardianship have proven ineffective or are unavailable. The Texas Council on DD's website states, guardianship is a legal tool which allows a person to make decisions for another person. Oops. It removes the civil rights and privileges of a person by assigning control of a person's life to someone else. Although the state directs a court to design a guardianship to encourage the development or maintenance of maximum self-reliance and independence of the incapacitated person, it's not uncommon for courts to create full guardianships, which deprive persons with disabilities of the rights to make fundamental decisions about their lives. The Texas Council on DD believes the vast majority of Texans with disabilities and the elderly can make sound decisions for themselves with appropriate supports. Guardianship removes the person's personal and civil rights, including the right to say where you live, work, and what you do with your free time. I want to emphasize that guardianship is an option that may be the right fit for some people and families. It's tended to be overused historically, and so information about the alternatives is really important to get out. I know that in my family, my parents were not given information about all of the alternatives to guardianship. And so in my role as a sibling, I brought them more information to help start the discussion about the possibilities for my sister in the future. During my family's planning process, finding out what Patrice wanted for the future proved to be a challenge. Her most common response to a question is yes, no, or I don't know. One strategy that we used to help Patrice communicate more easily was to make a scrapbook together with pictures of important people in her life, her likes and dislikes, and her dreams for the future. She loves cutting out pictures from magazines and putting together collages. So this was a fun activity that created a tool that she could use to share things about herself with others. What ways could you help the person with disabilities think about and express his or her preferences and desires for the future? Also, my family had gotten into the bad habit of speaking for Patrice, and we were not always giving her the opportunity to practice and get better at speaking up for herself. When we became aware of this as a family, we were better and more intentional about giving Patrice the space and time to speak up for herself. And over the years, she's really increased her communication skills to express her needs and wants. Patrice also learned new skills by attending self-advocacy conferences and learning from her peers. Self-advocacy is about people with disabilities speaking up for themselves. Texas Advocates is recognized as the leader in self-advocacy in Texas. Texas Advocates fight to stop unfair treatment and advocate for more and better services and supports for people with disabilities to be included in their communities. Texas Advocates has local chapters of self-advocacy groups across the state, and you can find out more on their website. Is your family member with a disability involved in a self-advocacy group? If not, how could you support them to learn about and consider getting involved? Person-centered planning is a process of planning for the future that puts the person with disabilities at the center. The person brings together the important people in their life to focus on what they want for the future and discuss ways to get support to reach their goals. There are different person-centered planning models that can be used for this process. The Center on Disability and Development at Texas A&M University and the Texas Center for Disability Studies at the University of Texas at Austin have developed an institute for person-centered practices where you can learn more. Building natural supports is another aspect for families to be purposeful about when planning for the future. At one of my family's future planning meetings, we realized that Patrice had to rely on family, mainly our parents, for most of the support she received. We started identifying natural supports in the community. For example, Patrice loves to go to the library in town, but she could only go when our parents had time to drive her there and pick her up. We began to think about who else in the community also enjoys going to the library that might be able to give Patrice a ride instead of always relying on our parents. This is often called natural supports. those unpaid supports in the community. This can include friends, neighbors, and community members. However, natural supports don't always happen naturally. These are relationships that need to be nurtured intentionally. Anne Turnbull, one of the pioneers in family support, who shares her own personal family story, has a beautiful analogy that I want to relay. It's the image of candles, which represent the people in a person's life. For people with disabilities, if their immediate family holds up candles, it produces light in a small portion of a room. When more people are invited into a person's life, just as more candles are lit, the light can grow and brighten the room way beyond the small corner of light that the family started out with. It shows how expanding a person's social network makes a difference beyond anything their own family could have done alone. This is a powerful reminder to me of the importance of trying to support my sister to expand her social networks beyond our family. Helping her build her social networks benefits our whole family, so we don't feel like we have to do everything to support her. And sometimes other people bring perspectives or talents or connections that we as a family would not have. This is increasing social capital, which means gaining a collective benefit from expanding your social networks. For example, through your relationship with each new person, you also increase your access to new information and resources that person has available. You gain access to someone with new skills and talents that person can share with you, and the additional contacts that person has that you might be able to tap into. Think about ways your family can use social capital or your community connections and relationships to support the person with a disability to do more in the community and rely less on family to make it happen. Write down ideas you have and bring them to your family to discuss. Figuring out where Patrice wanted to live in the future was a lengthy process. As my other sibs and I moved out of our parents' home and created our own lives, Patrice remained with our parents. Over the years, we began slowly to think about other living options for Patrice, especially as my parents got older. My parents and Patrice lived together really well. They had a great routine and they really enjoyed each other. There was no critical reason for Patrice to move out. However, we began talking about how we had seen difficult examples in some families where the person with disabilities lives with the parents until the parents die, and how this makes the transition for the person with disabilities that much more difficult. Also, we started realizing that Patrice's whole world revolved around our parents' activities and friends for the most part. And while they thought they were focusing things on her, it really wasn't totally balanced. It took a number of years of discussing this and slowly broaching the topic as a family with everyone to get their head around other possibilities beyond Patrice always living with our parents. Now every family is different, so this is just what my family's process was. When a new residential option was being built for people with disabilities in town, my parents and Patrice were open to exploring this option. They felt ready to consider it, especially because it was so close to the rest of the family in the community that Patrice grew up in, which is very rare. A lot of consideration and preparation was done before Patrice moved into her own supported living apartment. This picture shows my big family standing in front of Patrice's place. She loves living in her own place. She does a lot of fun social activities in the community that have helped her make her own connections. Some of her activities are targeted for people with disabilities, and others are part of the general community. My parents were surprised that after she moved in, she didn't come home and visit them more regularly. Since they lived 10 minutes away, they envisioned that she would come over every weekend and stay with them. And after about 3 weeks, she did not want to stay at their place. She wanted to stay at her own place. She's grown by leaps and bounds beyond when she was with my parents, and her social network has expanded exponentially. She's creating her own life, and she's really happy. Housing resources in Texas have a range of options. For home and community-based supports and services for adults with intellectual disabilities, the Medicaid waiver in Texas provides residential services and a lot more, including employment services, certain therapies, adaptive aids, and more. You can find more resources about this on the Texas Health and Human Services website at hhs.texas.gov, as well as your Texas benefits. You can meet with a benefits specialist to walk you through which benefits the person with disabilities has or is eligible for and how to navigate the system to get the needed supports. Also, there are some programs through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, that seek to increase affordable housing for people with disabilities. This includes Section 8 vouchers for low-income families, the elderly, and people with disabilities, and Section 811 supportive housing for people with disabilities that's focused on creating more affordable and accessible housing. Many people with disabilities live with their families, and their families provide care and support. One resource that not all families know about is respite. Respite is when you have someone else look after your loved one while you take a short break for things such as being able to go to the gym or grab coffee with a friend or do errands or attend meetings, or just to get a little rest to be rejuvenated for their caregiving role. Respite can happen in your family home or at a community location. There are different types of respite providers, and some are free and low cost, and there is some funding available for some possibilities. All people providing care for a loved one need and deserve a break at some point, and it can help the person continue to provide great care and be beneficial to the person they are caring for and their whole family. Feel free to share the resources about respite in Texas with the rest of your family and consider trying respite services if you haven't already. The ARCH National Respite Network has a lot of great resources, including a National Respite Locator, and you can visit archrespite.org for more information. Independent living services can be helpful for some people to get supports and services to live more independently. Centers for Independent Living, or CILS, provide services to help people learn independent living skills, get counseling to better understand their disability and help them reach their goals, enhance their advocacy skills, help people transitioning from institutional settings to community-based residences, find post-secondary education opportunities, and more. There are centers for independent living throughout the country. You can find a Center for Independent Living near you and contact them to find out what services and supports they could provide for the person with a disability. My family compiled what we call a day in the life of Patrice. This is a detailed document that tells her weekly schedule, medications, a list of doctors, and other key contacts to be in touch with in case something should happen to our parents unexpectedly. Since none of us siblings live the day-to-day details like my parents do, we don't necessarily know this information. In an emergency, this will help us be prepared to support Patrice. This type of document can be really helpful and important for families to develop. In my family, my mom took time to type up all the little things that would be helpful for us to know. Also, through this process, we discovered things that we didn't realize that Patrice may need support around. For example, we found out that Patrice calls my mom 3 times a day: in the morning before work to touch in and talk through the plans for the day, after she gets home from work to check in, and before bed to debrief on the day and discuss the next day. This was way more than me and my siblings realized, and we began thinking about who would be the person Patrice would call if mom was no longer there. And we also talked about whether Patrice really needs to call mom that much, and can this routine be adapted over time to just be 2 times a day or something like that. Because of all we did early on and over many years of family meetings, identifying Patrice's strengths and building on them, she's building her own life and thriving. We know that things will change as life changes. While we have a solid start to our family's future plan, we know that it's an evolving process and not something that will ever be completely done and that we can check off the list. Future planning is a process that helps everyone in the family get more on the same page about what the future may hold. This is important to discuss among each member of the family regarding roles, and it will change and evolve over time. A central part of the process is finding out what the person with disabilities wants. Everyone in the family should have a voice and a choice in the process. I hope that I've been able to go through the nuts and bolts of future planning process by sharing some of my family's story, highlighting information, resources, and insights in a number of areas, including legal planning, financial planning, residential planning, and building relationships and social support networks. My family's story exemplifies that the process is never perfect and you can learn as you go. Also, it shows how, once you get the ball rolling, it is easier to keep the momentum going. Thank you so much for joining today. And now I'll open it up for questions. And here's my contact information. You're also welcome to email me or contact me if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Arnold. I am going to pass it over to Erin and Genesee, who will lead the Q&A session. So you all can drop questions in the comments and we will be able to answer them. I do want to let y'all know the recording will be made available for those of you who are asking.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. And we'll start. I will start with the first question. And we also have some great comments as well that I thought you might want to comment on, Dr. Arnold. So the first one is a comment, actually. A special needs trust can be funded upon death of a parent. It has not been this person's experience that it needs to be funded until it's needed. And just wanted to see if that was your experience and if you could comment on that as well, please.
Yeah, thanks for that comment. And there's so many different ways that families can do it. There's not one right way. So yes, that could be one way to fund a special needs trust when a family does die, parents do die, and some of their assets are designated to go into that fund. And for other families, they may want to set it up prior to that and be even using it. I know in my family, we have set it up, there is some money in there. And then my sister has gotten some experience using it for different things in her life that she has wanted to use it for. And that's also helped our family kind of learn the process of how to use it. Which, there's no right way, one right way to do it. And so thank you for that comment.
Thank you. One of our other questions is coming from the audience. Can a person with a developmental disability make or give a power of attorney?
Can a person with a developmental disabilities make or give a power of attorney? I think, it really depends on the person's, status in terms of the requirements and their capacity for making decisions. But I think in general, if the person, does fit the eligibility, that yes, they can designate who they would like to be their power of attorney and make those decisions and also be part of the process of deciding what powers that person who is the power of attorney are designated to have. Is it just specific decisions? Is it, kind of broader things? And so those are conversations that I think are important for families to have with the person with a disability to see who they want to fill that role and then what specific decisions they feel they need support with and to make that designation in the power of attorney.
Thank you.
Okay, we had a couple more comments, but there was a question at the end, so I'm going to go to that one first. What is your take on master pooled trusts?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if I've thought about it that much to have a particular take on it. I just know that it's an option. I think it's an option that, some organizations have set up as a way to kind of pool people's trusts together. I think that it's one of those things that you might want to really see what are the specifications for that in terms of how the money is then used and who has the decision-making power for those things. But it's just another one of the options, and each family really should make their own decision about what's the right fit for them.
And it looks like we have Haley Greer on the line, and she provided some information about the Arc of Texas Trust. So there is some contact information in the chat right now. Should anyone have questions specifically for the Pool Trust for Texas?
One of the other comments in the chat that I think is was highlighted really nicely in your presentation is about how decision making is a practice and how everybody needs practice with that activity. And so one of the mothers in the chat was saying that it's sometimes struggling to kind of with that boundary of decision making, and appreciation for you speaking so well to that point, and like that it is a practice and it needs to be treated as such, you know, in practice making decisions. So thank you for highlighting that in your presentation.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I mean, in my family, it's taken many years. It's you know, taken a long time for my sister to build those skills, but also for our family to really, my mom used to use this phrase, zip lips and hands in pockets, so that we would like remember to try not to do everything for her, you know, as she was getting older. And it was something that we really had to be, we had to practice so that she could practice. So yeah.
Yeah, a whole practice for the whole family.
Well, thank you, Dr. Arnold, so much. Like Genesee mentioned, those real world experiences are so helpful with actually understanding the working parts of this process. I do want to remind the audience that the handouts are available. Skylar, if you could share that link again. Dr. Arnold put together a lot of really great links of resources within Texas of a lot of our community partners and people that we work with all the time. And so review that information again and again. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them our way or to Dr. Arnold. Brenda just mentioned, is there a way to get access to part 1? Yes, we will make sure that the recording for all 3 sessions will be uploaded along with the handouts to the website. As we talk about that, one thing for sure before everybody leaves, please complete the evaluation link for us. Evaluation is very vital and key to extension programming, as well as Dr. Arnold's department and everyone else in TCDD. And we would like to hear from you on how great this presentation was and about information that you would like to see in future sessions. So if you follow the link that has been dropped in the chat, you can complete the evaluation. And then as far as upcoming events, I have to sneeze. Okay, I think it passed. Sorry. We do have one more session of this 3-part series. That is July 27th, a Wednesday, noon to 1 again. And you see we go a little bit after 1 if we need to. And that one is on engaging with aging in the future planning process. And Dr. Heller will be the speaker for that session. So if you have not registered yet, there was a link that was dropped in the chat. Register for that last session. And again, the recordings will be made available for all 3 if you can't make it to the next session. Okay. And Dr. Arnold's contact information has been provided for you, and we're just showing it to you again if you need to shoot her any questions. And then if you need to reach out to our team, our regional coordinator team, a link has been dropped in the chat for that too, which has our names and emails available there for all of you across the different states. You can connect with your local regional coordinator. We have a couple more minutes before we hit 1 o'clock. So if you do have any more questions, drop those in the chat. we'll wait around for that. But thank you all so much for joining today. Again, thank you, Dr. Arnold, for an amazing presentation.